Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News, and here are some of the top stories we've been following. A Canadian mother pushes back against Israel's explanation of an airstrike that killed her son in the Gaza Strip. Plus, Canada's Prime Minister makes a stop in Alberta today as part of his affordable housing tour. And this weekend marks the 6th anniversary of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, which kicks off Organ Donor Awareness Week.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. The mother of a Canadian Army veteran killed during an attack on humanitarian workers in the Gaza Strip this week is rejecting Israel's explanation for what happened. But Sylvie Lebrecq says she remains hopeful that the deaths of her son, Jacob Flickinger, and 6 of his colleagues will lead to positive change for all aid workers and the people of Gaza. Flickinger, 33, was one of 7 World Central Kitchen workers killed on April 1st when their convoy was attacked after it delivered 100 tons of food to a warehouse in Deir al-Balah. Flickinger, who served in Afghanistan in 2010 and retired from the Canadian military in 2019, joined World Central Kitchen last fall as a means to help him recover from PTSD. He had been in Gaza since early March. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said early Friday that his security cabinet has approved a series of immediate steps to increase the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, including the reopening of a key crossing that was destroyed in the October 7th Hamas attack. Israel also published the findings of an investigation conducted by the retired Israeli general, which blamed the convoy attack on a breach of policy and a mistaken observation. Military spokespeople said that under the Israeli army's rules of engagement, officers must have more than one reason for identifying someone as a target before they can be hit. But the investigation determined that a colonel had authorized the series of deadly drone strikes on the convoy based on one major's observation from a grainy drone camera footage that someone in the convoy was armed. That observation turned out to be untrue, military officials said. The Army said, meanwhile, the colonel and the major were dismissed while 3 other officers were reprimanded, the most senior of whom was the head of the Southern Command. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says the measures the Israeli government has announced to expand the flow of aid into Gaza are welcome, but may not be enough to meet the Biden administration's demand for dramatic improvements in humanitarian conditions in the territory.
We welcome the steps that have been announced by Israel, opening Erez as a new crossing point, having shipments go directly from the Ashdod port, maximizing the route from Jordan. These are positive developments, but the real test is results. It's also critical that we see an independent, thorough, and fully publicized investigation into the killing of the World Central Kitchen team who were performing heroic work under the most difficult circumstances in trying to get assistance to people who so desperately need it. So we're looking to see that investigation, we're looking to see a public accounting, and we're looking to see accountability. Israel's obligation, its responsibility to maximize protection for civilians, to make that a priority, that too is a critical test.
Closer to home, Canada's federal Liberal government announced a $600 million package of loans and funding to help make it easier and cheaper to build homes for owners and renters. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Calgary today for the latest in a string of pre-budget announcements aimed at winning over younger voters. The government hopes $500 million worth of low-cost loans will foster projects with innovative construction techniques from prefabricated and modular housing manufacturers and other builders. The remaining $100 million will be spent between a home building technology and innovation fund and the modernization of expediting of construction.
Now, for more than a week now, I've been talking about new measures in our upcoming budget to make the housing market fairer for every generation. Younger generations like millennials and Gen Z feel like they're falling behind because housing costs are just too high. That's okay. That's not okay, and it needs to change. For Canada to succeed, we need everyone to succeed, which is why we're tackling head-on the challenge of building more homes faster.
In response to the PM's announcement today, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she's cautiously optimistic, but points out that Trudeau said recently he was going to leave it up to the provinces since it's not federal jurisdiction.
Well, look, I like some of the things that the Prime Minister is announcing, but what I would say is that just a few months ago, he said that this wasn't federal jurisdiction, that it was up to the provinces. And now that he's in trouble in the polls, now he's racing to, it looks like, do 5 announcements a day. Some of them, I think, will work with him collaboratively. Like, for instance, the announcement today where there'll be a bank of designs for manufactured and modular homes. I've been talking to my minister about that. I think that there's some wisdom in that. That being said, designs need to be able to fit into our climate. And so being able to have access to the expertise at the federal level is great, but it does require a local lens to make sure it works for us. I'm gravely concerned that this is really just a mechanism to try to implement net zero housing policies. That we determined a building code that makes sense for our environment, knowing that we have natural gas as the base fuel for heat, that natural gas remains the base fuel for our electricity, and we are not going to chase after a couple of dollars if it means hamstringing our ability to build the kind of housing that we need to, nor do we want to take a little bit of a few dollars if it's going to result in tens or $20,000 or $30,000 of additional cost on homes. That kind of defeats the purpose of trying to get affordable housing.
The Premier made those comments while she was in Brooks, Alberta today to announce funding for an expansion of Brooks Junior High School. It's a project that will see 157 more spaces for students with the hopes of having the extra space ready for the 2027-28 school year. According to Smith, 28% of the school's population are newcomers.
We've all heard the news that Alberta is growing at an unseen pace in decades. Brooks is growing too, of course, and that includes our student population. And although it might be hard to tell right now, since students are currently enjoying their spring break, this is a bustling school. Right now, Brooks Junior High is the education home of a growing number of newcomers. For a full 28% of the student population, English is not their first language, and many of those came without previous formal school experience. Our community has been waiting for a replacement school for Brooks Junior High, the only standalone junior high in town, because they need the space and it needs the maintenance.
Brooks Junior High School is over 70 years old, having been built in 1953. This expansion is part of the $2.1 billion provided by the province to build and modernize 43 priority schools across Alberta. This year marks the 30th anniversary of Francophone school management in Alberta. What started as just 2 schools serving 367 students has grown into 44 schools and more than 9,400 students across the province. The province is advancing 8 priority projects for Francophone schools, including full funding for the construction of a replacement school for the École Bollière in Fort McMurray and a solution for the project for École St. Catherine in Lethbridge.
The announcement today for funding for the construction of the new École Boréale will mean that all of our students will be under one roof for the first time. For too long, our school has not had the space for the infrastructure required to offer high school programming. This meant that once they reached high school, they moved to École McTavish, and while they continued being École Boréale students, it was not the same. We thank École McTavish for welcoming our students, but the transition of the French language and culture is vitally important to the work we do as a Francophone school, and was not possible in an English-speaking environment.
It looks like Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek will keep her mayoral hat on after all for now. As you may recall, there was an attempt to get Gondek removed from office. Calgarian Landon Johnston initiated a petition back in January and had a very short window to get more than 514,000 required signatures to have Gondek removed. April 4th was Johnston's deadline, but at last count, he had just over 72,000 signatures. The city now has 45 days to count the number of signatures that were collected, the first step in determining if the petition is sufficient to recall Gondek from the mayor's office. The trial of 3 men facing charges for their involvement in the 2022 Coutts border blockade continued today. Alex Van Herk, Gerard Jansen, and Marco Van Hugenbos have each pleaded not guilty to mischief over $5,000. Prosecutors are seeking to prove that the 3 accused men led an anti-COVID measures protest that tied up Alberta's border traffic for 2 weeks in 2022. The defense, however, is suggesting the contrary of a mishmash protest where no one had the power to call the shots. During defense lawyer Michael Johnston's cross-examination of Coutts Mayor Jim Willett, Johnston pressed Willett about how it was a disorganized protest that didn't seem to have anyone in charge. The trial is scheduled to run until April the 19th. Well, this weekend marks the 6th anniversary of the fatal Humboldt Bronco bus crash, which means Green Shirt Day is also occurring this weekend on April the 7th. It is a day in honor of Logan Boulay, who succumbed to his injuries in the wake of the crash. He was one of 16 passengers who lost their lives. His parents, Toby and Bernadine Boulay, offered to donate his organs so that 6 lives could live on. They did so because Logan told his parents he was registering as an organ donor. As news spread of the organ donation by the young hockey player, it's estimated that nearly 150,000 people registered to become organ donors in the days and the weeks that followed. To date, this is the largest number of Canadians registering to become organ donors in Canadian history due to one event. This phenomenon later became known across Canada as the Logan Boulay effect. According to his parents, the Logan Boulay effect continues to spread and grow year after year.
It's a proud moment to know that Logan's legacy, Logan's story has continued on for 6 years and that it's growing all the time. We're getting lots of feedback from the Canadian Transplant Association membership that we're finally able to go outside and meet people without wearing masks, where confidence levels up. So with Canadian Transplant Association people meeting in groups and talking about it, that's how the story will progress. And it makes us proud to know that.
Yeah, I think it makes a big difference that to know that the story is still continuing, that it's not it hasn't lost its momentum or its impact or its inspiration, to know that people are still talking about organ donation and how Logan's story has impacted them personally and impacted so many people who are waiting for organs.
Green is the official color of organ and tissue donation, symbolizing the hope organ donors provide to patients in need. Recent data shows that women are underrepresented in the skilled trades workforce here in Alberta, but a spring break camp is helping to bring more females into skilled trades. BCN's Naveen Day has the details.
It is time to toss out the mindset that skilled trades and technologies are just for men and start sending a new message to Alberta's future workforce. That is according to Alberta-wide organization Careers, the Next Generation. This week in Lethbridge, they held their Young Women in Trades and Technologies Spring Break Camp. They partnered with 6 local businesses and organizations to provide an opportunity for female youth to explore a wide variety of career paths in a safe and encouraging environment.
Across Alberta, there's definitely a skilled trade shortage at the moment, and many employers have recognized that women, with their attention to detail and some of their proactive approaches to dealing with situations, can be really helpful in trades-based industries. And plus, employers are looking to have equal opportunities for both men and women and offer a new generation of skilled workers into industries.
Over the course of the 3-day camp, females in grades 10 through 12 had a chance to learn from industry experts and to try their hand at a number of trades including welding, carpentry, plumbing, auto body, cookery, and water and wastewater operations.
I definitely see myself somewhere in a trades environment. I definitely like this environment a lot, and I think it shows a lot of students here that there's a lot more of trades than we think.
According to a 2022 Built Force survey, women accounted for only 7% of the skilled trades workforce in Alberta. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Well, the Toronto Blue Jays have showed off their latest renovations at Rogers Centre. The 100-level seating bowl looks much different, and there have been changes to the field and dugout areas.
The scope was pretty incredible. I think we probably did an 18-month project in 5 months. A big part of that was in order for us to build facilities below and change the angles, bring the fans closer to the field, we really had to demolish the bowl. And what that meant was taking this bowl down to nothing, digging, and then rebuilding it so that we could create all of these angles, so that we could provide all these amenities. And, you know, how that was accomplished was pretty incredible in one off season.
And in other news, experts are working to get an orphaned baby orca out of a lagoon off of northern Vancouver Island, where it's been stranded since last month when its mother died. They say the complicated process of moving the whale will hopefully start in a week or so after they were unable to coax it out on its own.
Using a sling onto a vehicle and then moving the animal that way to either a landing craft or a vessel that we can then move the animal to the net pen. And there's various things that we're looking at, so we have options over time. And again, you want to have options based on the logistics here. It may change over time, and the helicopter is an option, especially if the timeline's short, but that's not our primary option right now.
Oh, poor little guy. I hope he gets to safety soon. Now here's a look back at today in history for April the 5th.
April 5th, 1986. A bombing at a disco in what's then West Berlin kills an American soldier and a Turkish woman. The U.S. retaliates more than a week later with an air raid on Libya, narrowly missing its leader Muammar Gaddafi. 1964.
Old soldiers never die. They just fade away.
General Douglas MacArthur dies in Washington at age 84. MacArthur led U.S. forces in the Pacific during World War II and the Korean War, also overseeing the occupation of Japan. 1856. Booker T. Washington, the African-American educator who founded the Tuskegee Institute, is born in Franklin County, Virginia. 1972. Reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes dies at age 72 while being flown from Acapulco, Mexico to Houston to seek medical treatment. 1984. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar becomes the highest-scoring player in NBA history, a record which he holds to this day. And 2006.
Sometimes I think change is a good thing.
Katie Couric says she's leaving NBC's Today Show to become anchor of the CBS Evening News. She's the first woman hired to be the solo anchor of a network evening newscast. Today in history, April 5th, Mike Gracia, The Associated Press.
Well, we haven't seen too many leaves or flowers yet in this part of the world, but overseas in Japan, take a look at this. Thousands of visitors braved the chilly weather today to see the cherry blossoms in Tokyo, which bloomed a bit later than expected in the capital due to recent cold temperatures.
It's breathtaking when it's been pretty to see a few, but as they all bloom right now, it's a really breathtaking thing to see. We feel fortunate. It's like a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Weren't those cherry blossoms just gorgeous? And speaking of unseasonably chilly weather, a heavy spring snowfall made for messy driving conditions across southern Alberta today. In Calgary, city crews were out plowing and sanding major routes, but it was icy and slow on the roads. Environment Canada says as of 7 a.m. today, 15 to 25 centimeters had fallen over the previous 24 hours, and tonight another 5 to 10 centimeters is expected to fall right here in the Lethbridge area. I'll be right back after the break with a full look at weather. Welcome back. We are still under a snowfall warning here in southern Alberta, including the Lethbridge area. We're expecting another 5 to 10 centimeters of snow this evening. And then as we get into Saturday, still another 2 centimeters. And also Saturday night, another 2 centimeters. So going to be a snowy one. High of 2 degrees on Saturday. Up to 5 though on Sunday. Sunday we are seeing mainly cloudy conditions. Could see a bit of drizzle mixed with some flurries in the morning there. And then we get into the clear skies for Monday and Tuesday. Up to 9 degrees on Monday, and then into double digits from there on out. 12 for a high on Tuesday, up to 13 on Wednesday, and then look at that, up to 18 degrees on a Thursday. So finally, we're going to be back in spring-like conditions. Average high for this time of year, 10 degrees. Average low, -3. 22 was our high temperature on this day back in 1969. And on the flip side, we had the coldest on record back in 1975, and it was a chilly -21. 6:58, that is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening at 8:11. That means we had 13 hours and 13 minutes of daylight today. Nice to see the sun rising in that 6 o'clock hour. Also on the west coast tomorrow, seeing double digits, but a little bit rainy. 40% chance of showers in Victoria, 10 for a high there. 30% in the afternoon. Showers there in Vancouver, 11 for a high. Edmonton and Calgary, going to see a little bit of everything, especially in Edmonton. They are expecting a little bit of snow, a little bit of drizzle, a little bit of freezing rain, and some fog. High of 7 degrees there, high of 2 in Calgary. Calgary seeing freezing drizzle overnight and then snow tomorrow. As we get into the prairies, we're seeing mainly clear skies and also some windy conditions though. But look at those teen temperatures, lovely. 13 for a high in Saskatoon. Regina sitting at 14, could see up to 50K winds there in Regina, and Winnipeg up to 60K winds tomorrow with a high of 13 degrees though. And then as we look to the central part of the country, Toronto sitting at 9 degrees, mix of sun and cloud. Ottawa seeing a little bit of showers mixed with flurries, high of 8 degrees and high of 6 degrees tomorrow in Montreal with partly cloudy skies. As we get to the East Coast, we are seeing a lot more in the area of precipitation. We're seeing mixed rain, mixed drizzle with flurries. That would include all of these areas. So Fredericton high of 4 degrees, 5 for a high in Halifax, 4 for a high in Charlottetown, and just 60% chance of flurries tomorrow in St. John's, high of 2 degrees there. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Statistics Canada is reporting the largest increase in the unemployment rate since summer of 2022 as more people looked for work in March and job growth ground to a halt. The agency says the unemployment rate jumped to 6.1% last month. That's up from 5.8% in February. Stats Can says the economy is shedding 2,200 jobs, mostly in accommodation and food services, followed by wholesale and retail, trade and professional, scientific and technical services. Meanwhile, employment increased in 4 industries led by healthcare and social assistance. Major cell phone and internet providers say they're ready to handle a surge in wireless traffic during Monday's solar eclipse as visitors descend on regions that fall along the path of totality in eastern Canada. The city of Niagara Falls in Ontario says it's expecting up to 1 million visitors, its largest crowd ever, and warns cell service may become spotty. But Canada's telecom giants say they're confident their networks will hold up. Rogers and Bell say that they're deploying additional infrastructure to certain areas to prevent any potential disruptions. And Boeing has paid $160 million US in initial compensation for losses that Alaska Airlines suffered after a panel blew off of one of the aircraft company's MAX 9 jetliners. The airline says it's expecting more compensation, but didn't say how much. The initial payment covers Alaska's first quarter pre-tax loss related to the January incident. And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 212 points on the day to finish at 22,264. The Dow was up 307 points to 38,904. The S&P 500 was up 57 to 5204. And the Nasdaq was up 199 points to finish at 16,248. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 13 cents to 86.72 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 1 cent to 179 US. Gold was up $38.80 to $2,329.75 US an ounce, and silver was up 56 cents to $27.48 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.44 per bushel, barley's at $6.40, canola's at $13.79, and corn is at $7.57 per bushel. Live cattle were down $3.23 to $178.25. Feeder cattle were down $5 to $237.70. Lean hogs were up 98 cents to 89.33, and the Canadian dollar was down over the past 24 hours to 73.58 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the mother of a Canadian Army veteran killed during an attack on humanitarian workers in the Gaza Strip this week is rejecting Israel's explanation for what happened. But Sylvie Lebrecq says she remains hopeful that the deaths of her son, Jacob Flickinger, and 6 of his colleagues will lead to positive change for all aid workers and the people of Gaza. Flickinger, 33, was one of 7 World Central Kitchen workers killed on April 1st when their convoy was attacked after it delivered food into Gaza. Coming up after the break, we speak with the lead pastors of Parallel Church, Kelly and Joylyn Stickle, who give tips on how to keep the home fires burning in marital relationships. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Many people agree that marriage is a relationship ordained by God, but it can be tricky to keep that relationship thriving. Today's guests are going to help us do that. Kelly and Joylyn Stickle are a husband and wife team, and they are the lead pastors of Parallel Church right here in Lethbridge. Pastors Kelly and Joylyn, welcome back to Bridge City News. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks, that was great to be here.
Excellent. Now, I'm curious, how long have you two been married now?
28 years.
Wow.
Double check that, yeah.
Been a while.
To look at each other. So the romance sometimes can fade in marriage, and it's entirely possible that we may not even notice the signs. Why is that?
I think it's easy to just kind of do the motions, go through life, especially when things get busy and you have kids and the kids get busy and stuff. And so it's easy to kind of lose that and not see it happen unless you're intentional. I think intentional is a big part of marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to drift. It's easy to have just the busyness of life kind of occupy or preoccupy what the focus is. So like Joylyn said, is you have to be intentional in making effort to make sure that the marriage is priority over all of the distractions that can potentially come.
Yeah.
And once you notice the romance thermometer is dropping down, what steps should be taken to get the temperature back up again?
I think a big part of that, again, is the intentionality of making sure daily you're having connected time with one another, that whether that's a deep conversation or whatever, just to make sure that a priority daily. Weekly, it's great to go on dates and set aside an evening or time with each other.
Yeah.
We like to quarterly get away for a night or two, yearly go on a holiday that just the two of us away from the kids and distractions of life, and kind of rekindle relationship that way. But again, it's intentionally saying, okay, we're going to put that in our calendar. We're going to make it a priority, make our marriage a priority, and focus on doing just that and put it in the calendar, not just saying we want to, but actually put it in the calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the Bible says where your treasure is, your heart is there also. And so I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical treasure, but if you figure out what your spouse's love language is and how they feel loved and connected, then intentionally putting that treasure into your marriage, your heart will follow if it's kind of lagging behind. But yeah, I think it's easy, like we had said, it's easy to kind of get overwhelmed and just go through the motions. So just being intentional, putting it in your calendar is a big part of it.
Now let's talk about married couples for a bit here, because long ago I was married and didn't last very long, but I want to talk about like the honeymoon phase, because that can wear off sometimes. And I noticed that very early on into my marriage, I started noticing things like, oh, like she's snoring louder than she normally does, or like has her morning breath always been that pungent? So what are some steps to stay in that honeymoon phase or keep it going longer?
I think the honeymoon stage is often what we classify as the feelings of love, that feeling part of love, which is there, and it's a real thing. But love is much deeper than just the emotions that we feel at on a time. And so when we get familiar with someone and we get to know them, we get to see the real them. Sometimes the feelings aren't there, but what Paul describes love in 1 Corinthians 13 is like love is patient. Well, I don't remember the last time I had the feeling of being patient. It's not a feeling driven thing at all. And love is kind. Love is doesn't envy. Love is keeps no record of wrongs. None of what he lists in 1 Corinthians 13 is based on feelings. So there are decisions that we have to make on a daily basis and push beyond the feelings, the emotions, the triggers, all those things, and just saying no, despite the nuances of being imperfect people with one another, that we're going to push beyond that and choose to love, choose to be kind, choose to be patient, choose to be keep no records of wrong, and make those choices every day.
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that, especially however long we've been married, you're always growing as a person, or you should be always growing as a person, and your spouse is always growing as a person. So if you are stuck in who they were when you were dating, and not allowing them the chance to grow and the growing pains that go with that, then you're taking away a lot of what real life is. And the beauty of being in a partnership like a marriage is that you get to grow each other, and you get to iron sharpens each other, right?
Right.
And it's a cool thing to just give them the space and give yourself the space to become who you're becoming. And that is hard sometimes, right?
Yes.
Now, obviously, it's important for couples to communicate in some fashion that you love and appreciate one another. I mean, I've heard some guys say like, well, I told you when I met you I love you, and if anything changes, I'll let you know. Obviously, that's not healthy. So any suggestions on how we can do this and how often we need to show our love and appreciation?
Love languages.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you should be the biggest cheerleader for your spouse, and you should be the biggest student of your spouse. And so figuring out who they are and how they feel love, and and show them that way, because they're going to feel it better that way. So with the love languages, like mine are words of affirmation. Mine are most of them, but he says I'm either easy to love or hard to love, because I'll take it all. But I'm easy to love, right?
Yes. Very much.
So words of affirmation, if he doesn't as much get that, or feel loved by that. He feels loved more by the acts of service and stuff. So if I'm constantly just gushing on him with words but don't do anything for him, he's not going to feel that as much. And so again, being intentional, being the student of your spouse, and making it your priority to study who they are and how they feel loved is a big part of it.
And if couples haven't read that book, The 5 Love Languages, it's a must for every marriage. And the natural tendency for all of us is, like Joylyn said, is to give what we receive naturally ourselves, is to give that back. But that's not necessarily the language that our spouse receives. And so we need to be able to speak their language over our own preferences, and give preference to what they need most, and do that on a daily basis. Like that's not something that you let slide for a while and say at the altar and never say again. like it's a daily practice of making sure that they feel loved and cherished, and are priorities over anyone and everyone else.
Yeah.
I agree what you said about the 5 love languages, because it's amazing that that book has really gained popularity even in non-faith relationships. In fact, being on dating apps, I've noticed a lot of people are even asking what their love languages, asking each other what their love languages are, or saying these are my love languages, or they're sharing their Myers-Briggs. But what really fascinated me was they are talking about love languages. So I think that's really fascinating that something that came from a Christian author is really so popular amongst all kinds of relationships here. Now, I've also noticed that marriage experts encourage couples to find things that they both enjoy and to do those things together. But that can be tough to find time with kids and work, etc. So how do you find time?
I don't think you ever find time. I think you have to make time.
You claim time.
You claim time.
Yeah.
And I think you have to make it a priority and saying, okay, well, if we just wait to find time, life's going to eat that up really quick. I think you have to be intentional and make the time, and pay attention rather than just get distracted or what grabs your attention. Pay attention, make the effort to pay attention to your spouse, make the time to be together and to do things that you enjoy together. Yeah.
And I think it's super healthy for kids to see a strong relationship between parents and to not be the center of attention. So they're going to go into stronger relationships when they're older if they've seen it demonstrated throughout their life, and they've seen dad prioritize mom over them sometimes too, right? And vice versa. And so you're helping your children by showing them how a good relationship works and that mom and dad are prioritized, and that gives them security as well, to know that
absolutely
that they're secure in the family.
Now, today's couples typically watch a lot of TV programs together, and there's a lot of binge-worthy content out there. But they can also get influenced by social media, and this can portray a somewhat unrealistic view of what a husband or wife should look like and how they should behave. Do we need to adjust our marriage expectations?
Absolutely. I think social media has probably done a greater disservice, I think, than even television lately.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times what we do, we walk right into the comparison trap where we begin to compare our behind the scenes to somebody's highlight reels. And we have to recognize that what is portrayed on social media is somebody's highlight reels. You're not seeing behind the scenes. You're not seeing all the messes and the messiness of life that is real.
Yep.
And so it's dangerous to watch somebody on social media or watch a marriage on social media and going, oh, I wish my husband was like, or I wish my wife was more like, or I wish our marriage was like that. A very dangerous thing to do, to walk into that comparison trap. And it puts undue expectations on yourself, but undue expectations on your spouse, and recognize, hey, our marriage is different than anybody else's. But this is our marriage. We don't, this is our relationship. This is our personalities coming together to becoming one. And it's not going to look like everybody else's.
And over time, we can start to get critical of one another, especially if we're seeing the same person every single day, day in, day out, every day, every weekend. How can couples break that cycle of negative communication?
In the art of communication, psychologists will talk about changing the story in your head. And oftentimes we go in with a preconceived, especially to those that we're closest with, we go into a preconceived idea of, oh, they did that on purpose, or they're trying to, and we end up getting critical because they forgot this again, or there's just like them this. And psychologists say, change the story in your head. And like Joylyn said, is hey, when we were in love, when we got married, why would somebody who loves me so much promise, their lives with mine? Why would they intentionally try to hurt me? If I can change the story, they're not intentionally trying to hurt me. And just simply changing the story in my own head is going to allow me to enter into the communication with not defensiveness, not angst. It's going to allow me to enter the conversation with, hey, being open and saying, hey, this hurt me. I felt this, and I know you didn't mean it, but I felt this, and it becomes a lot easier to have a conversation than going in accusatory.
Yep.
Kelly and Joylyn Stickle are the lead pastors of Parallel Church in Lethbridge. Kelly and Joylyn, thanks so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Well, from alcohol and drug addictions to life's hurts and pains, the reality is most of us know someone, whether it's a friend, a coworker, a relative, or anyone who struggles with this. Some do find help through the medical system, some never find help at all, and others find a spiritual solution. Joining us from Lethbridge to discuss this is Patty Bidevat, ministry leader with Celebrate Recovery. Patty, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Absolutely. Okay, so maybe give us a bit of an overview of what Celebrate Recovery is all about.
Well, Celebrate Recovery is about finding freedom from our hurts, hangups, and habits of any kind. Most of us in life have been hurt in some way or another. And some people think that this is just for people with addictions, but it really truly isn't. We've all had hurts or hurt somebody at some point. And so we get freedom through Christ, and this is long-lasting true freedom.
Okay, and you meet in Lethbridge, right? So where and when do you guys meet?
We meet on Friday evenings at 7 p.m. at the Park Meadows Baptist Church, and the last Friday of the month, though, we start at 6 o'clock because we have a pizza supper, and then it's a special Friday evening that it's a celebration. So Celebrate Recovery, we celebrate.
Okay, now you mentioned the church there. Now, are people who aren't involved in any church or even non-Christians welcome to attend as well?
Everyone is welcome to attend. We welcome with open arms anybody, and we are glad to see new faces. And it is growing. It is ministering to Christians or non-Christians, and it's a great program for absolutely everyone, men and women, anybody above the age of 18.
Wow. Okay. And so you say that the program, it's not just for people who are struggling with drug and alcohol, but for a wide variety of hurts, right? Or habits or hangups. How do you help those people? Maybe explain that a little bit.
Absolutely. It is for a wide variety of hurts, hangups, or habits. Some people have issues with codependency, or maybe there might be other addictions like shopping addiction or food addiction, or just simply been hurt and are struggling with maybe some anxiety or depression, and just need some support from a loving group of people that love God and love each other and just want to help one another in finding this true freedom. And this is it's a part of what God has brought into my life and many people's lives around the world. And so it's for absolutely anybody.
Yeah. And a lot of those hangups sound like things that many of us can relate to as well. I mean, we all get anxiety at sometimes, the shopping addiction, I can totally relate to that as well. And
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure you see it in various degrees to the point where people
Yes.
need help. So it's almost like a 12-step program though, right? Where kind of similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. So what would the key differences be?
Well, it is very similar to the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have not been involved with Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'm not familiar at all. But from what I've heard, and that's where it originated, John Baker from California was very involved. He's passed away last year, but he started at Alcoholics Anonymous, and then he was wanting to do something that was Christ-centered. And so he talked to the pastor of his church, Rick Warren, and that's where it all started. Rick Warren just said, okay, this is your ministry, go with it. And so it's biblical based. The 12 steps approach is from the Beatitudes, from the book of Matthew. And so it's very, set up the similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. We also have 8 principles. Uh, and so it's really set up well according to how God wants us to be able to truly find freedom, and not as the world sees it. But it's great.
Interesting. It's interesting that it was started by the same person who started Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA, as it's more commonly known. And it sounds almost like he wanted to kind of make it a little bit more spiritual. Like AA is spiritual. They talk about your higher power, but it sounds more like he really wanted to hone in on that sort of Christian angle. Is that kind of what I'm getting from that?
Yes, exactly. He went to church there at Saddleback in California, and there was no Christ-based program to help people with addictions, and he had an addiction, and so he was searching, and so then he wrote up this. Uh, yeah, a paper to the pastor wanting to start a ministry. And Rick Warren just said, go with it. It's blessed by God. And it's in every country around the world. It's a huge ministry, and it is really, truly helping many, many people. And me personally, it has helped me, as I have been hurt in my past. And so I came just, seeking help, because I was struggling with some anxiety and depression. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess you turn around and now you're leading that group, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
amazing. So what kinds of
What?
things would take place in a typical meeting? Maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Right. So at the beginning of the meeting, we have 2 main parts, and then at the end we can just get together for coffee and snacks at the very end after 9 o'clock. But the first hour between 7 and 8 o'clock is a large group, and people come, and we sing some worship songs, and we go through and say the either the 12 principles or the 8 steps, and we listen to either one week we listen to a lesson by Johnny Baker or somebody else. Um, Sometimes it's online, that's how that is taught. But every other week, then we do a testimony, and we are trying actually to once a month have a live testimony. So some of our leaders have written up their testimonies, and we'll share them in person, which is very powerful.
Wow.
And so that's great. But otherwise, we have testimonies that we have access to online. And so the large group will meet and listen to that. Then the men and the women between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock divide into separate groups, men and women. And then they are welcome to openly share something that touched them about the testimony, or what was important that they could glean from the lesson, and just digging deeper. And also then there's a time of prayer where we can pray for one another. So it's such a blessed evening, and it's such amazing people coming together to just support one
Are
another.
people required to share their own struggles at these meetings, or is it more of a like when you see fit, you can open up about it, you can sit there and just take it all in, you don't have to necessarily share?
Right. At the beginning, many of us are nervous to share, and so there is no requirement to share at all. Only when you are ready, you can share. And where God leads and how he leads. And yeah, at the beginning, a lot of people don't share, and that's okay. Come and listen, come and just be a part, build relationships, connect with other women or men, and just, yeah, over time,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
as the
just
heart leads.
curious when people are addicted to a substance or if they have a lot of that hurt that they're holding on to, how long does it take to recover from that? I know it would vary definitely from person to person, but is there kind of an average timeline that you're looking at?
Well, I'm not sure about an average timeline because a lot of people's addictions are different. We are not counselors or we don't do counselor referrals, but some people do come after they've been either in a treatment or sometimes they come before they've been in treatment and then they realize that maybe they should go for treatment. So it definitely varies. I don't know if there is a an average time line, but for every person, it all depends on how serious you are and how diligent you want to dig into your
Sure. Yeah,
healing
no, that makes
and
sense.
your journey.
Are there any particular keys to breaking an addiction?
Um, there is ultimately giving it to God. God really leads, and so that's a huge thing. Connecting with other people that attend and finding that support when you are struggling. We freely can share our cell phone numbers or communicate with people on Friday nights. After the Friday nights, um, the men have started something on a separate night called Step Studies, which digs deeper through some actual work and whatnot. And it's usually about a year long. The women are going to be starting shortly for these step studies. And so it's a separate day of the week. And you dig deeper, but you also connect more deeper on those during those step studies. So that's a separate other than Friday nights. And so that depending on how deep a person and how diligently a person is working on that will be how quickly and how soon you will find that some true freedom.
Sure. And of course, we are human beings, and obviously, people have relapses. So, what happens when a person relapses? What's the plan for that, and how often does that tend to happen?
You know, for every person, it's different, and a relapse can happen sometimes even at the beginning, one every other week or every week or whatever. Sometimes, whatever, like it can happen. And there is some of the lessons are geared to relapse. So there is one of the lessons called relapse. And it really helps us be aware that relapse is possible and if it does happen, what we can do. And what we can do is just keep going. Pick up your bootstraps, like don't um, stop your healing journey. And that's when we truly need to lean into our fellow celebrate recovery people, our and really just talk to them and just be open and honest. And there is no shame in coming back whatsoever. We are just glad that people will come back after relapse, and that we know they will, yeah, continue. And that's the blessing of seeing that where somebody has relapsed and they just keep
Sure.
then walking the journey.
Yeah, I mean, we often hear that sometimes our social circles can shape us. So, with that said, how important is it for someone who wants to break that cycle of addiction to form some new social networks, get some new friends? Is that almost key?
It is. It is very much key because when you've been very entrenched, maybe in a deep addiction, your social circles are people that are also commonly in addiction. and in that same addiction. And so therefore we really encourage people to connect and stay connected with friends that they meet at Celebrate Recovery, and communicate once a week or more often if needed, so that they can keep going, and yeah, they will probably see that they will connect more and more with their new friends. And that's what we encourage, and encourage, as they would like to maybe go to church, and meet people there. But yes, building new friendships.
Right. And then once again, just to remind our viewers, you meet at 7 p.m. on Fridays, right? In
Yes, we
Lethbridge,
meet.
anyways. Where is that?
Yes, we meet at 7 p.m. In Lethbridge at the Park Meadows Baptist Church. There is another church that is also supporting along the way and has other people involved that have come from that church, and that's Parallel, also in Lethbridge, which has been great. We've got some great support there too. So yes, it is at 7 p.m. at Park Meadows Baptist Church every Friday.
Okay, and I would imagine if somebody does not live in Lethbridge, our viewers in Ontario or wherever, they can check with their local churches to see who
Yes.
offers a Celebrate Recovery program.
Yes, they would be able to look online and be able to find a location near them.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
It looks like we're out of time here, Patty, but thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for highlighting this awesome ministry, what God has done. Yeah, he's just continuing.
Patty Bidevat is a ministry leader with Celebrate Recovery. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.